Hello everyone and happy October! My name is Mike and this is the Bored Cyborg. Let's keep the horror rolling. Ow! Welcome back to yet another episode. Today I'm talking about my top 10 films from the 1990s, a fantastic decade for horror, one that I'm very fond of. Nostalgically, of course, I grew up in the 90s, saw a lot of these films in the 90s when I was way too young to see them, but they shaped me, they made me the man who I am, and I can't speak. I've got my top 10 and then 5 honorable mentions as usual. Let us not waste any more time and jump right into the list, but before we do that, I encourage you guys to leave your top 10 films from the 1990s in the comments below. I'd love to read through the lists and get a little discussion rolling as usual. My first honorable mention is one of my favorite Chucky films, Child's Play films, that is, Child's Play 2. I think Child's Play 2 is, I think it might be the best Chucky movie. It's between Bride and Child's Play 2. I'm feeling Child's Play 2 right now. It's my favorite Child's Play movie. And why? It's because it is so refined. It is so Child's Play. Chucky is having a blast. It's shot so cleanly. The set pieces are memorable, especially the finale. I think the music is the best in the series. Everything about Child's Play 2, it takes what made the first one work so damn well and ramps it up just like a great sequel should. This is a full-on, no bullshit Child's Play movie with Chucky killing, wreaking havoc from the very beginning, and I love it. Child's Play 2. Next honorable mention is Evil Dead Trap 2. So, this is the sequel to Evil Dead Trap, a loose sequel, a spiritual successor more so, just has the same name. This one is subtitled Hideki, and I can't even begin to go into why that is. This is one of the weirdest fucking movies I've ever seen in my life. It's a slasher film through and through with a great lead character, Japanese slasher by the way, great lead character. She's imperfect, she's confused, she's socially awkward, she has a hard time making friends, and her descent into madness is portrayed with such consummate elegance. Elegance is the wrong word. It is so strange and surreal. It's got this beautiful juxtaposition between neon colors that are emanating from the buildings and the signs, and then just stark blackness. And it just creates this wonderful atmosphere. The last 20 minutes of this movie are absolutely insane. It is Evil Dead Trap 2. I love this movie. Ha! Next honorable mention is Frank Henenlotter's Franken Hooker. I love Frank Henenlotter's work. He's one of my favorite directors from the 80s and the early 90s. He's an inspiration on my personal work. Franken Hooker is just that. I've talked about it before, but it's about a young man who starts taking parts from prostitutes to create his perfect hooker. Frankenstein hooker. Like, it's the weirdest fucking thing. It is excellent. It's Franken Hooker. Next up is Dan O'Bannon's The Resurrected. Man, I wish this guy directed more films. He did this, and prior to this, of course, he did Return of the Living Dead. But Resurrected, which is also known as Shatterbrain, is such a great Lovecraft adaptation. It's based on Charles Dexter Ward, or The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. It stars Chris Sarandon in a wonderful role with a great character arc. If you know the Lovecraft story, then you sort of know where it goes. Resurrected has some of very, very Lovecraftian sequences, some gruesome practical effects, and it's just a slow burn sort of procedural detective trying to figure out what's going on with Charles Dexter Ward. Things progressively get weirder, and it is just a great Lovecraft adaptation. Dan O'Bannon gets it. He gets Lovecraft. Of course, Dan O'Bannon gave us Aliens. He helped write Alien, of course. So that is The Resurrected, also known as Shatterbrain. And my last honorable mention is The Frighteners. Man, I love this movie. The Frighteners is such a cool Peter Jackson horror, fantasy, hard R, by the way, sort of film. It has great performances by Michael J. Fox and Jeffrey Combs in an insane role. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But it's really kind of a play on Ghostbusters. You know, Michael J. Fox's character is technically like a Ghostbuster sort of paranormal investigator guy, and he tries to help people get the ghosts out of their house. He's clairvoyant. He can communicate with ghosts. This movie is awesome. It's Peter Jackson's last attempt at horror, and I think he knocked it out of the park. The Frighteners is great. If you haven't seen it, check it out. The Frighteners is my last honorable mention. All right, jumping right into my number 10 is one of the best films of the 90s, one of Carpenter's best, one of the greatest Lovecraft adaptations ever put to film, In the Mouth of Madness. I think this is the perfect amalgamation of Stephen King's work and Lovecraft sort of mushed together to create a unique story starring Sam Neill. He plays a private investigator of sorts who is sent to go find the author of a series of very popular horror novels who seems to have gone AWOL. He's just out. No one knows where he is. There are a couple inklings that lead Sam Neill's character to this man's domain. Things get crazy, progressively crazier, and we all see it through Sam Neill's eyes. We live vicariously. He's our vessel, right? The audience's vessel. And his reaction to all these things, he's very scientific. He's very, he doesn't believe a lot of the things he's seeing because he knows they're impossible. And when things really start to hit the fan, his performance really shines. And I love Sam Neill. I love Sam Neill, especially in these sorts of genre films. In the Mouth of Madness, John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness is my number 10. I love it. So many Lovecraftian scenes, like the things coming down the hallway, like In the Mouth of Madness. My number 9 is a film that I did not catch in the 90s, but I caught it in the early 2000s with a couple buddies of mine. They were fans of this movie growing up, and so they put me onto it. That is Tales from the Hood. Man, we watched this so many times when we were in high school, freshman year, really. Tales from the Hood is an urban horror anthology film. That's the best way to describe it. Clarence Williams III plays the caretaker, who is just such an iconic horror character that nobody really talks about. He's the one who tells the stories, the multiple different stories. He's also the one that, it's his story is a story in and of itself. It's what they call what do they call it? The surrounding story, the I forget what they call it, but the padding story, the story that sort of all the other stories exist within. So it follows, just all of the stories are great. There's one with these little traditional sort of African-American dolls that come back to kill this racist plantation owner. There's another one with David Alan Grier, which is one of the scariest and most disturbing segments in the film. The one with David Alan Grier, who plays the father, and you would think David Alan Grier, he's this nice, charming, actor, comedian guy, but in this he plays an abusive father, and his son is drawing these monsters, and the teacher sees that he's drawing these monsters. The monster turns out to be, it's not really a spoiler, you know where it's going, but turns out to be the father, the abusive father, and it is just such a hard-hitting little segment. This movie is fantastic. It deals with issues in the African-American communities at the time when no other horror films were really discussing these issues and exploiting them and trying to understand the science, the essence behind them. Tales from the Hood gets all of this so damn right. It still holds up to this day. Some of the issues that were addressed in this film are still issues today. It is so important to check this film out. Tales from the Hood is my number 9. All right, my number 8, believe it or not, is another Sam Neill film. That is Event Horizon. Some may argue and not say that this is a straight-up horror film, which I agree, it's not. It is a science fiction horror film with heavy Lovecraft influence. This is in my horror shelf, so goddammit, it's in my top 90s horror films. Sam Neill is fantastic as a physicist who built this ship, this top of the... Oh, Jesus! Sam Neill plays a physicist and a ship, the one who designed the ship that they are on, to go find, they're trying to find another ship that was lost. They don't know what happened. Communication was lost, so they're sent out, not unlike Alien, distress signal sort of situation, where Sam Neill's ship and the crew, they fly out to find out what exactly happened. They get more than they bargained for, of course, and they discover some very, I'll say, hellish situations. I know this film had a lot of production issues, and there is or should be an extended edition out there somewhere. I don't know if we'll ever see it. Apparently this film was so violent that it was making the test audiences sick and leaving the room and crying and all this shit. So goddammit, I want to see it. I want to see the unedited version. This film gets really gruesome and really graphic at points, especially during the third act. What we got from Paul W.S. Anderson is still one of my favorite 90s horror films. I love it in its current form. I'd love to see an extended edition that's even longer and even fleshes out the characters a little bit more, but it is what it is Event Horizon. Alright, my number 7 is a Wes Craven film from 1991, that is The People Under the Stairs. This follows an impoverished youth that is growing up in a really shitty neighborhood, and they're just trying to get by. He gets roped into this job, essentially. These two petty criminals decide to break into this house that belongs to an affluent couple to steal some jewelry, whatever it may be. This kid, Fool, his name is Fool, by the way, he gets roped into doing this with these guys, these older gentlemen, these adults, because he's small and he can get into areas where the big guys can't, and so on and so forth. Of course, when Fool is in the house, shit goes very wrong for him. The parents come home, who are known as Mommy and Daddy, by the way. Everett McGill, and I always forget the female actor's name, but they're both from Twin Peaks. They play very similar characters. Fool quickly finds out that this place is like a prison from the inside. When Everett McGill's character, Daddy, locks down the house, Fool is now trying to survive. He's trying to survive. He's trying to navigate through the walls and through the underground, the basement and everything. That is what's so cool about this movie. It really captures the child's imagination for exploration in this giant house where this insane couple is trying to murder him. I'm not going to go into what makes this film even cooler. There are some twists and turns along the way, of course, but man, People Under the Stairs is so fucking good. It's one of my favorite Wes Craven films. Not my favorite Wes Craven film, but one of. It is my number 7, People Under the Stairs. Next up is another Peter Jackson film, Dead Alive, also known as Brain Dead, I think everywhere else in the world. I've yet to upgrade to Blu-ray. The Blu-ray is so out of print and expensive. I'm waiting for somebody like Scream Factory or something to pick this shit up and release it in an accessible form. Right now, the DVD will suffice. This thing is scratched. I've been watching it for 15, 20 years now. And I love Dead Alive. How can you not love Dead Alive as a horror fan? This is the gore movie. This movie has more gore in it than almost any movie I've ever seen. Maybe the most. And it follows a innocent young man who strikes up a romance with a young woman. Their relationship is so goddamn cute. The music, just the two of them together are so adorable. And what ends up happening is this, in the very beginning, this monkey on Skull Island, by the way, connection to Peter Jackson's King Kong, is infected with some sort of crazy virus. He bites one of the guys. They bring the virus back, of course, to New Zealand, the mainland, and shit gets insane from there on out. It bites the innocent young man's mother, and she starts to deteriorate. Her ears are falling off. There's a disgusting scene where she's eating soup, and oh god, I can't, like, pus goes into this. It's disgusting. This movie is the most insane Looney Tunes inspired horror film you will ever see. I kick ass for the Lord! That's all you need to know. Everybody knows this movie. I love it. Peter Jackson's Dead Alive. It's my number 6. Alright, getting down to the top 5, and of course we're getting more and more nostalgic as we go along. Whew! This one's a nostalgic one. I saw this back in '97 when it hit home video, and I shouldn't have watched it because I was 9 years old. My parents thought it was going to be fine. They were right and wrong. Scream. I love Scream. I think it's one of the best slashers of all time, and obviously one of the best 90s horror films of all time. One of the best horror films of all time, god damn it. Wes Craven at his best when he's deconstructing a genre which he helped create with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Scream is quintessential deconstruction. It's quintessential slasher. It takes all of the lore that existed before it, and it picks it apart little by little and creates a whole new slasher paradigm. It is such a wonderful movie. It is brutally violent. Some scenes that stuck with me as a kid, like the very beginning when the guy gets eviscerated out on the patio. I was so scared watching this film, guys, and it was broad daylight. I remember it was broad daylight. I was sitting on the floor, laying on the floor. My parents were on the couch watching it, and I didn't want to be around my parents because I knew it was going to be something that they were like going to try to shield me from. So I moved down to the floor. The Fonz being hung from the field goal post. I'll never look at a field goal post the same way. Just so many brutal kills. The Ghostface killer is iconic, beyond iconic. What can you say about Scream? It's such a wonderful movie. It's such a well-written, clever, witty, smart horror film. I love it. Scream, my number 5. Oh my god. One of the earliest memories of a horror film. I'm counting this as a horror film. It's more of an adventure, action, fantasy kind of thing, but it's definitely horror. And that is Army of Darkness. I saw this when I was around 5 years old, so around when it came out. I remember my father and mother having a discussion about if I should be allowed to see this film. My father, of course, thought I should be. He ended up winning the argument. My father and I sat down and watched this movie, and I have very vivid memories of certain scenes that affected me as a child. I didn't really pick up on the humor of it until I was a little older. When I watched this at 5 or 6, I was utterly terrified, at a lot of the stuff. Obviously, the Three Stooges kind of slapstick I liked too as a kid, but what really got me was the geyser of blood that came out of the pit where the demon witch thing was. That geyser of blood, I had never seen anything like this, guys. You gotta understand, I had never seen anything like this in life, let alone in movies. I fell in love with it when I was 5 or 6 years old, and as time went on, I gained more of an appreciation for it. It is neck and neck with Evil Dead 2 in terms of my favorite Evil Dead movie. Army of Darkness is quintessential Bruce Campbell doing Ash. Groovy, baby. Give me some sugar. All the lines, well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants. All of the lines, it is infinitely quotable. Army of Darkness is a masterpiece of comedy, horror, action-adventure. They don't make them like this anymore, folks. Stop motion, paced so perfectly. A whole bunch of little mini Ashes that are torturing big, real Ash. Army of Darkness is a glorious thing to behold. It is Looney Tunes to the extreme. I absolutely adore it. Army of Darkness. Next up is another extremely nostalgic film for me. I saw it when I was 8 years old on HBO or Cinemax when I shouldn't have been watching it. Candyman. Candyman f***ed me up. I couldn't look in a mirror the same way for years. Years. In fact, there was a time I was in CCD of all things, and we were doing Candyman in a pitch black bathroom. We were doing Bloody Mary, and we were all like, oh yeah, we're not scared, we'll do it, but all of us were a little bit scared. That's the beauty of childhood, right? And Candyman, when I saw it as a kid, scarred me for life. It really did. It wasn't until later that I learned how much of a social commentary it is. It's one of the few horror films that takes place in an urban environment, in the hood, in Cabrini Green in Chicago, which is no longer there. It is an urban legend in its truest form. It is an African-American urban legend, really, at its core. It's about a slave who was tortured and killed with the assistance of bees, and thus he's back to regain vengeance. He's got a hook for a weapon, hook for a hand, bees swarming in and out of him like it's their home, like it's their hive. Of course, Tony Todd he makes this role. He makes Candyman who Candyman is. Without him, it wouldn't be Candyman. I know they're remaking this. Jordan Peele is behind it. I'll judge it when I see it. But Tony Todd will forever be Candyman in my mind. Candyman is such a great horror film, straight up horror film with a wonderful score by Philip Glass. Ba-da-da-da-dum-dum, bum 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 bum. Ba-da-da-da, Candyman is the shit. I love it. Oh man, it's like the nostalgia is just compounding me into my childlike self. This is another film I saw when I was 11 when it came out in '99. That is The Blair Witch Project. Now, I have to talk about this briefly. When this movie came out, as an 11-year-old, I thought it was real, okay? You gotta understand this is pre-internet, or the very early days of the internet, when we didn't know how to navigate it, we didn't know what we were doing, really. My parents either thought it was real, or were playing a trick on me. A very cruel trick that I appreciate now. But I think they thought it was real as well, because no one had ever seen a film like this before. Of course, there are films that predate this. The Last Broadcast, which is nowhere near as good, and also Cannibal Holocaust, which in my opinion is nowhere near as good. Cannibal Holocaust was from the 70s, so it wasn't until 99 when these guys, Sanchez and Mirnik, did this film while they were in college on no budget, which is so fucking impressive. It is all atmosphere. We never see the ghost. We never see the witch. It's all the terror, the frights are accomplished through the sound design, the natural organic performances, and the atmosphere, which is just the woods. It's so impressive. I can't praise this movie enough. It's one of the best found footage films of all time. Hands down. The tension just continuously racks up. Things get progressively but subtly more strange and more horrific. It is such a well done movie. And I gotta tell you, when I watched this at 11 years old, I had to sleep in my parents' room on the floor in front of their bed with the dog, R.I.P. Lucky, for about a week because this film chilled me to the bone. It wasn't until a week that I could go back into my room and sleep like a big boy in my own bed. Man, this movie f***ed me up for life, and I'm so grateful for it. It affects me, it chills me to the bone like not many films do. I've only seen it 3 times, too, and every time I'm about to see it, I have this dread fill up within me, and it always scares me, guys. Always scares me. That is why it's my number 2, The Blair Witch Project. Whew! Such a great movie. My number 1 is another nostalgic film that I saw in the early 2000s with some buddies of mine, and it wasn't until later that I truly fell in love with this film, and at this point I consider it the greatest horror film that was released in the decade of the 90s, and that is Jacob's Ladder from 1990. Tim Robbins plays Jacob Singer, who is a Vietnam War vet who is trying to cope with life back on American soil. He's haunted by the memories of the war. He's haunted by the memory of his son who has passed. So he's got a lot of problems. He's very lonely. He's very desolate in terms of his social relationships. And he begins to start experiencing visions of demons. Very practical, very creepy, well-lit, sort of partially hidden demons. And there are some more upfront, right in your face sequences, like the ones where like the faces are going all crazy. This film was definitely inspired Silent Hill, you know, the makers of Silent Hill. It deals with a lot of the same issues, you know, the personal fears, the personal issues that one could have. The relationship he has with Elizabeth Pena is at once poignant and very cute, and even a little bit awkward at times, because you could tell Jacob's trying to break free from his imprisonment, his mental imprisonment. And as things, again, it's one of those movies where as things go on, things get weirder and weirder for Jacob. Reality and the nightmare kind of world that he's existing in sort of start to blend together, and it's hard for him to determine what is real and what is a nightmare. And the line continuously blurs to the point where it's not even distinguishable anymore. This film has a wonderful twist ending. It is such a well-done, well-directed horror film by Adrian Lyne that not enough people know about, not enough people talk about. This is a classic of the genre. It is utterly horrifying. It is dreadful. There's no light at the end of the tunnel with this film. It is Jacob's Ladder from 1990, and it is my number 1. Whew! I just want to thank you guys for checking out my top 10 films from 1990. I'm dying to know what your lists look like. Please go ahead and leave those down in the comments below. I look forward to reading each and every one of them and getting a little discussion rolling, because in my opinion, this is what it's all about. Everybody's got their own opinion, their own passions, their own films that they love, and I really look forward to reading that in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel and want to see more videos like it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg, out.